We'll begin at the 78th United Nations General Assembly in New York, where President Tinubu is advocating global sanctions on companies and persons illegally smuggling arms and minerals in and out of Africa. President Tinubu's speech also captured Nigeria's interest in business partnership with other countries of the world. TVC News State House correspondent Femi Akonde reports on highlight of President Tinubu's speech at the UN.
Just outside the United Nations headquarters, people are making their way inside. Ahead of President Bola Tinubu's speech to the UN General Assembly, his first address on the biggest global stage as the leader of Nigeria. Inside the General Assembly hall, President Bola Tinubu takes to the rostrum to deliver a broader message that transcends beyond Nigeria and cuts across Africa. He called for a crackdown on terror financing, economic sabotage, and illicit mineral and arms smuggling in the developing world.
Our entire region is locked in protected battle against violent extremists. And the turmoil, a dark channel of inhuman commerce has formed. At the same time, mercenaries and extremists with their lethal weapons and vile ideologies invade our region from the north. This harmful traffic undermines the peace and stability of the entire region.
President Bola Tinubu is bold about his declaration that Nigeria is open for business and a promise of return on investment for multinationals willing to come in and explore the abundance of opportunities in the country.
We welcome partnership with those who not mind seeing Nigeria and Africa assume larger roles in the global community. The question is not whether Nigeria is open for business. The question is how much of the world is truly open to doing business with Nigeria, and how African is an equal, mutually beneficial manner.
Just like other world leaders, President Tinubu committed to the global climate action and pledged that Nigeria and other African nations will cooperate with the fight against climate change. But there is a caveat to this. African leaders will fight climate change on their own terms.
Climate change severely impacts Nigeria and Africa. I also lament the grave loss of life in Morocco and Libya. The Nigerian people are with you. Please note that. African nations will fight climate change, but must do so on fair and just terms.
Beyond the flowery speech at the United Nations, there seems to be a lot of excitement and optimism generated by what the speech translates to for the people in the country and on the continent. They commended Nigeria's new posture of leadership in Africa. The coming days will be busy for President Bola Tinubu as he continues to push Nigeria's investment drive and fast-track national growth and opportunities. Femi Akonde, TVC News, New York.
And President Tinubu has been commended for his drive of putting Nigeria on the global investment map in Africa and the world. This was part of reactions of some members of the Nigerian delegation to New York, including Minister of Humanitarian and Poverty Eradication, Betaito.
I think first it showed very strong leadership. The president talked about strong leadership for Africa and Africa taking the lead, Africa not being a problem but a solution to the future. And he insisted that Africa must take its place in the affairs of things as it concerns the world. He called for sincerity in the approach of dealing with Africa and Nigeria indeed.
This is one of the first time I hear a president speaking about the power of Africa, the EU, the AU, and how we're able to make some move as a country, and the potentials way ahead. I'm really excited. I look forward to a lot of exciting things that are going to happen in Nigeria over the next few months.
I think it was a very unique opportunity for the president to lay out his agenda, and I think he did. He talked about democracy, he talked about the security issues in West Africa, especially around the Sahel, with the coups. He touched on Nigeria's need for reforms, and the path is taken. So it resonated with the international community, and it also resonated with Nigerians abroad.
And one thing about that speech is this: it projects Nigeria. It tells the world that Nigeria is ready for business. It tells Nigeria that Nigeria is actually leading in Africa. And our President Bola Tinubu, has actually come out to actually tell the world that Nigeria is ready, that Nigeria should now lead from the front.
Joining me now is Director General Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Bola Tinubu. Thank you for joining us on the news, Prof. We saw the president speak yesterday not only as Nigerian leader, but as a leader of the continent, calling out UN member states to match words with action, particularly as they crack down on financing terrorism, economic sabotage, and the illicit minerals and arms smuggling in the developing world. What do you make of the president's first speech at the UN General Assembly?
It's a pleasure being with you. I think the speech is a very welcome development for two major reasons. First, it is a reaffirmation of Africa as the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. This is particularly important because Africa, either as cornerstone or as centerpiece, as introduced in 1976 by the Professor Adedeji report, underscores the need to defend Africa's interests in all ramifications, that Nigeria should be a leader in ensuring the Black dignity. So in this particular case, I think that particular emphasis of Africa should be praised, should be commended. Secondly, when you look at the speech, it's now talking about preparedness to be engaged in the development of Africa, and complaining about unfairness and injustices in various ramifications. And you just rightly pointed out, for instance, the issue of pillage of if you look at what is likely responsible for the coup d'etat in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, even in Gabon, even if the environmental conditions are different, you will discover that the exploitation of Africa's resources, especially in those countries that I've just mentioned, that's a major dynamic of the coup. And the countries are simply complaining, militating, contesting, protesting against such exploitation. So the mere fact that President Bola Tinubu, not only as president of Nigeria, but the mere fact that he is also the primus inter pares at the ECOWAS level, as ECOWAS chairman, therefore having a supranational authority, Now, he is now saying that he's alive, he's responsible to really lead not only the ECOWAS region, but the African continent in reawakening Africa's consciousness. So for me, it is a very welcome development.
Absolutely. The president also talked about the need for Africa to have its unique way of dealing with issues of climate change and the rest. But how much of results do you expect this speech to get? How should Nigeria follow up on this direction that the president seemed to have set, particularly his clear demand from the world as to how Africa needs to be helped?
Of what General Charles de Gaulle of France, former president of France, who kickstarted the Fifth Republic, what he said or what he asked. He asked the French, who will do for you what you refuse to do for yourselves? This is a very pertinent, this is a very relevant question. For our own president, Bola Tinubu, to be expecting global largesse, to be expecting that the developed world, the stronger nations of the world will come and solve your problems for you the way we expect that, I think is more or less of a dream. I do not expect much from the international community. And I can give you many, many, many instances. Let me just remind you that, look, for how many decades now has the United Nations been asking these member states of the international community to kindly make available to the developing countries 0.07% of their GDP. Where are we? Where are we on this? It has always been there. Even when you talk about climate change, I had the opportunity of attending the UN summit on climate change in Copenhagen. And I discovered that my minister by that time, Ujoma Doeke, was one of the African leaders who raised the issue that, look, why should it be a major financial burden for Africa? Why are you asking Africa to pay as much, contribute as much, when you know quite well that Africa is not responsible for the pollution of the ozone layer? You see, at the end of the day, those who are polluting, those who are responsible for this climate change, for this global warming, they are not prepared to do as much.
Indeed.
In fact, the United States didn't show keen interest in the beginning. So for us, I think that if we really want a solution to Africa's development challenges, let us look at the approach of self-help first, rather than expecting the international community to come to our aid.
Absolutely. Director General Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Professor Bola Tinubu, thank you for talking to us on the news this hour.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.